But hi, my name's Esther. You can call me Est. I'm one of the leaders here at Abbey. It's good to see you all this morning. And today is week 2 of our January teaching series called Who Are We? What a big question to start the new year with, isn't it? And in this series, we're going to be using the Bible book of Acts to explore this question in the context of our current church vision and what it might look like for us all together in 2025. And last Sunday, Stu started us off with some words that we feel God has been saying to us as a church around a new season and creating space. And we read from Acts about where Jesus tells his friends to wait, be filled with the Holy Spirit, and only then to go. If you missed that, if you want to be reminded of all the good stuff Stu says, do catch up online. And as it was in the book of Acts, it's crucial for us as Jesus followers that being filled with the Holy Spirit is our starting place, our foundation, our covering to whatever comes next. So without the Holy Spirit, it's just going to be a bit rubbish. Remember that, if nothing else. And so back in September, we shared our vision focuses. Is focuses a word? What's to foci? Is that it? I don't think that's a word. Anyway, Esther, don't get distracted. Here is a reminder of those 4 things. The first one is welcoming everyone and sharing Jesus in our local communities. Equipping and investing in our children, youth and young adults. Committed to supporting physical, emotional, mental and spiritual well-being. And to establish Abbey Church building, that's this space, as a community hub in Horfield. And so today, as we read some more from Acts, we're going to be looking at what welcoming everyone and sharing Jesus looked like back then, and how it's relatable and relevant for us, Abbey Church, today. And our title for today is All In. So a little reminder about the Bible book of Acts. Stu covered some of this last week, but before we read our verses, so Acts is written by Luke. Luke is a Jesus follower, doctor and historian. And Acts is a follow-on from his first book called Luke, which you can find just a couple of books previous in our Bibles. And in Acts, we read about these early followers of Jesus. And to be honest, it is a ride and a half. If you read through the whole of Acts, you'll see quite quickly that it wasn't perfect. They weren't jumping from one miracle to the next. These were real people living their real lives. It was amazing, it was terrible, and it was everything in between. And they didn't claim otherwise. And sometimes this book is given a bit of a longer name, and it's called the Acts of the Apostles. And I read something that I found quite interesting and helpful in this. And it was saying that while different apostles, people, do appear throughout the book, there's only one single character who holds the story together from beginning to end. It's not Peter. It's not even Paul. Can you guess who it is? Jesus, yes, that's not a trick question. Jesus appearing personally right at the start or acting through the Holy Spirit. And this is a quote that I read. It said, "The book, therefore, could be more accurately named the Acts of Jesus and the Spirit." And I think that's pretty cool, and it's quite helpful to kind of have that perspective as we read this book. Not about the people, not about the big names of Peter and Paul. It's about Jesus and the Holy Spirit. So we're going to read from Acts chapter 2, verses 41 to 47, and we're going to read chapter 3, verse 1. If you've got a Bible, it might be helpful to follow along. We might jump around a bit. If you haven't, don't worry. There are some Bibles at the back. Please go and help yourself. The words will also be on the wall behind me. So this is Acts chapter 2, starting at verse 41. Those who accepted his message, and that's referring to the words spoken by Peter about Jesus in the verses before this. So those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. One day, Peter and John were going up to the temple at the time of prayer at 3 p.m. So here's where we're going to go today. We've got 4 things we're going to have a look at. The first thing, the 3,000. Second, a way of life. Third thing, transaction or transformation. And we're going to finish up with whoever. So our first thing, the 3,000. Verse 41 says, those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day. And so Luke, who writes these words, he is a meticulous kind of guy. Like if you read Luke chapter 1, he emphasizes how he has carefully investigated everything from the beginning. And that he wants everyone reading his books to know the certainty of the things you've been taught. Like facts and accuracy are important to Luke. So about 3,000 intrigues me. And if you can, why don't you picture this scene? In my head, I can imagine Luke carefully and precisely accounting for every single person. He's got a pen, he's got some paper, or whatever they used in those days, and he's carefully writing down, you. And then suddenly Peter shouts over to him, "Oi, Luke, will you put that pen down for 1 second and give us a hand baptizing these people?" So Luke puts his pen down, goes and helps. Whatever is going on, I see no reason for us to question about 3,000. Either way, it is quite simply a lot of people. And so who were these people? If we jump back to verse 5 in chapter 2, it says, now there were staying in Jerusalem God-fearing Jews from every nation under heaven. And a few verses later, Luke lists some of the different places and languages spoken by all these people. So, we have about 3,000 people from a load of different places, speaking a load of different languages, who were a load of different ages with very different life experiences, religious baggage, personalities, likes, dislikes, expectations. And they all said yes to following Jesus pretty much at the same time. Can you even imagine it? No, I can't. And if you are one of the about 120 believers that Luke refers to in Acts 1 verse 15, what do you do? The last few months for those 120 believers have been insane. They've done life with a very alive Jesus. They've seen him gruesomely crucified. They've heard outlandish rumors that he's alive again. They then see Jesus alive again. They've heard him speak and tell them to wait for something that's awesome and better than he is. Then Jesus has literally disappeared off into the clouds. And so these 120 people, they have waited and they've prayed. And then there's been a ferocious wind, something looking like fire, and they're speaking languages they've never even heard before. And then your church, not that they call it that, gets 25 times bigger in just one day. Take a breath. I feel for them. But those 120 believers, they were overflowing with the Holy Spirit. And because of that, and I think only because of that, they were able to adapt and be flexible in so many different ways so that everyone, all the people, were genuinely welcomed to join in and work out the Jesus way of life all together. And I think there's a huge challenge for us here. And some questions. Like, how well do we welcome all people into the core of who we are as church and as Jesus followers? And how adaptable and flexible are we prepared to be with our comfort and what we're used to if it's compromising our welcome of people? They're big questions, broad questions, so I'm going to get specific for a minute. So in the last year, some different people I've met have started asking me questions about faith. And I know I shouldn't be surprised by this, but surprisingly, they're keen to come to church. And not just any church, this church. But they will never be able to come to church on a Sunday because they work. Like, they will always work on a Sunday, that's their job. So, what do we do with this? Like, I know this can't just be on me. And I believe with all my heart that working out, following Jesus in and with a community of Jesus followers is vital. I know that from my own life. So, like, where do we go? Do we ask people to change their career because I'm afraid we only do church on a Sunday? Or maybe we shuffle things around. Maybe we look to create space that could provide all kinds of people a welcoming community on a different day of the week. We'll talk about that maybe next week. But this is a good problem to have, right? Because the Holy Spirit is doing stuff in people's lives today. Like people we know and love. And so can we be a group of people who put welcome first? Not just as a theory, not just when we feel like it, but who put welcome first and create space for people to get to know Jesus, even if that comes with what we might see as a cost. So let's move on to our second point, a way of life. The rest of our verses from Acts, they get a bit practical, which is great because who doesn't love practical? And we read that this Jesus way of life looks like learning, praying, miracles, sharing, meeting, and eating. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? I don't mind those things being a part of my life. Well, most of them, anyway, particularly keen on that last one. But as you read through verses 42 to 47, is there anything that you notice? If you could just pop that one up. In verses 42 to 47, there is no mention of I. There's no talk of my life. Instead, and don't call me on this maths if it's wrong, because it probably is. I read this way too many times to try and get it right. We have they, themselves, and their 7 times. We have together 3 times. The word all twice, plus one, everyone, everything, everyone. Like these guys, they're learning and following the way of life modeled by Jesus. And the they at the start of verse 42, that isn't just those 120 original, faithful, we met Jesus in the flesh followers. This includes those about 3,000 newbies. Like this is no solo effort. It's a messy, all in, all together way of life. And for those of you who might be internally panicking right now because it sounds terrifyingly woolly and lacking any kind of structure, rhythm or routine, don't worry, it's not. And I think actually this might be more challenging. There's a very intentional and needed structure to this Jesus-centered way of life. None of it just happens because the Holy Spirit is breathing all over the place. Like we read that the 3,000 plus devoted themselves to learning. They met every day. They prayed at specific times, 3 p.m. in the afternoon being one of those. They ate together. They broke bread. That's communion together regularly. There's two big words in there. They devoted themselves. Not because Peter really loved a timetable or enjoyed filling their diaries. Like they did this, they had this structure and routine because they realized that choosing to follow Jesus, to be going all in, needed a whole new way of doing life. And in verse 47 we read, "And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved." Like this, all in together, all about Jesus, structured and filled with the Holy Spirit way of life was attractive. Like people who saw it, lived around it, they liked it and wanted to be a part of it. Like the 120 believers of Acts 1 was never meant to stay 120. Even the about 3,000 never meant to stay 3,000. And all of this is the same for us. Like we as a church, as Jesus followers, we are never meant to stay the same. Who we are, what we do, all put together needs to be about introducing people to Jesus. And as we dig a little deeper into this, I think there are some more questions we need to ask ourselves around, like, what do we think we're signing up to when we say yes to Jesus? What do we actually mean when we talk about becoming a Christian? And this is where we get on to point number 3, which is transaction or transformation. So let's remind ourselves of that vision focus for us. It's welcoming everyone and sharing Jesus in our local communities. I've got a blunt question for you. Is there any part of this, if you start to say that out loud, is there any part of it that gets stuck in your throat? What stops you jumping up and down with excitement, shouting, "Yes, Esther, let's do this," apart from being, who we are? Like, is there any part of this that gets stuck in your throat? And I'm going to be really honest with you. I remember when we talked about this specific vision focus as a leadership team a couple of years ago. And I remember the thoughts that were flying through my head at the time. They went something like this. Okay. Yes to welcome. Yes to everyone. But that's a big one to say out loud, isn't it? Can we actually do that? Can we actually live that out? Oh, and of course, yes to sharing Jesus. Do we really need to say that out loud, though? Isn't it obvious? Are we sharing Jesus? Am I sharing Jesus? And if we put this in writing, will it freak everyone out? And when I say everyone, I mean you. Is someone going to say the word evangelism? Are we going to turn people into projects? Will we start trying to measure it? Is that okay? Is it terrible? Is sharing Jesus too much? Is it not enough? Will people get that our communities actually means everyone? And what am I actually doing with my life? What's the point if I'm not helping people see and find Jesus? I'm a terrible Christian. Oh no, that means I'm a terrible church leader too. Welcome to my head. And it's possible you may have similar or other thoughts along these lines, because we all carry different experiences when it comes to the sharing Jesus thing. And some of it will be relating to our own personal experience. Some of it will be to do with our background, our family or church experiences. Some of it will be great and hugely positive. Some of it will cut deep and make this painful. And all of it will be very different to the person sitting next to you. So let's be kind. John Mark Comer talks about this transaction and transformation thing in his book, Practicing the Way. And I found this really helpful, because sometimes we can make becoming a Christian a bit like a transaction. And we make out like God is sat on a big throne in heaven with a Sharpie and a checklist, and he's saying, right, I've sorted Jesus giving his life and paying your price. Don't worry about that. You just now need to say the prayer, whatever that is, sign up to a set of beliefs, go to church, be nice, on Sundays at least. And for all that, you get your very own ticket into heaven. And we're like, phew, that's a relief. Job done, everyone's happy. Let's tick that off the list. Thank God, very literally, that this is not it. There is so much more. And so what if we talked about instead becoming an apprentice or follower of Jesus? And the definition of an apprentice is a person who is learning a trade or art by experience under a skilled worker. Like there's a combination of on-the-job training and more formal learning. And to me, this sounds very similar to what we see Jesus doing with his disciples in the Bible. And a follower, when Jesus says, "Come follow me," to all kinds of people, it's a literal invitation into his life, and it's one that involves movement. Like Jesus says in Matthew 11, "Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it." Like this is an invitation to ongoing, lifelong transformation for us personally and us together. It's an invitation to be walking so close to Jesus that we get the dust off his sandals in our faces, and so we become more and more like him. That we get to see the bits of Jesus' kingdom and his good stuff here on earth as it is in heaven, in the right here, right now. And we get to be a part of bringing that too. Like becoming a Jesus follower is about ongoing transformation. It's not a one-time transaction. And we see this ongoing transformation happening in our verses from Acts 2. Like this brand new community, they kept Jesus front and center, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who are being saved. Like, this is the adventure, like this is the way of life that we need to be holding out to people around us, saying, like, come and see. This is for you, it's for all of us. Let's do this and work it out together. Like, with Jesus, nothing will ever be the same again. And so to finish up, whoever. We're going to finish with some verses from a different part of the Bible. And it's Jesus speaking, which is always a good thing, and it's harder to argue with. And I think, for me, there's some of the best all-in verses going. And this is from Matthew chapter 16, verses 24 to 25. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it." Then Jesus says to everyone apart in and around Abbey Church, to everyone here today, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. Two things. The first thing, with Jesus, whoever means whoever. Anyone and everyone, all invited. Whoever means whoever. The second thing, with Jesus, we find a way of life that is full of life, and it asks that we go all in. We give everything. It's not one or the other, it's both. And this is Jesus speaking very directly to each one of us and all of us together at the same time. So the question for us is, are we in? And are we all in? I'm going to pray and then I'm going to lead us into communion.